Picture a world free of pain, sickness, and death. A world where you don't have to toil endlessly just to put food on the table. Sounds like a utopia, doesn't it? But what if I told you that, according to one of the world's most ancient and revered stories, humanity was just one single step away from that very existence? Today, we're going to conduct a thought experiment. What if Adam and Eve had said no to temptation? What if they hadn't eaten that forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge? How different would our world, our civilization, and even we ourselves be? Get ready, because the answers might truly surprise you. Let's briefly recap the initial premise. The Garden of Eden, the first two humans, Adam and Eve, living in perfect harmony with nature and their creator. And one singular rule: do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As we all know, that rule was broken. But in this timeline, in our scenario, things play out very differently. So let's begin our journey into a world where everything went right. The first and most profound change: humanity never leaves the Garden of Eden. Just imagine that for a moment. Our home isn't a planet of deserts, glaciers, and raging oceans. Our home is an eternally blooming, perfect garden. Here, seasons as we understand them simply don't exist. There's no scorching heat or biting cold. Instead, it's always an ideal, comfortable spring. Trees are perpetually laden with luscious fruits, and meadows burst with vibrant flowers. Rivers flow with pure, cool water. Forget earthquakes, hurricanes, or droughts. Nature here isn't a force to be battled, but a nurturing mother. This means the very concept of home as a shelter from the elements simply doesn't exist. There's no need to build huts or seek refuge in caves. The entire world is your safe and comfortable home. Humanity doesn't spread across the planet, doesn't colonize new lands, because why would you ever leave a place where you already have everything? All of civilization, if it can even be called that, is concentrated in one perfect location. This is the singular starting point, the change that reshapes absolutely everything that follows. And since we remain in paradise, a second, equally significant transformation takes place. We remain immortal. Death, as a punishment for sin, simply doesn't exist in our reality. Consider this. In our world, old age as we know it simply doesn't exist. Our bodies don't wither, and our strength never fades. You never have to say goodbye to loved ones, because they never truly leave. Imagine a life free from the fear of loss, free from mourning, free from cemeteries. Life has no endpoint. It's not a fleeting moment you must rush to live through, but an endless, continuous flow of existence. Each today doesn't bring you closer to an end, but simply marks another day in eternity. All relationships, all connections, they are eternal. This fundamentally alters our perception of time and the very meaning of our existence. The absence of death becomes the fundamental cornerstone of our entire psychology. The logical progression of immortality is the complete absence of illness. Our bodies are perfect biological machines, incapable of failure. Forget about viruses, bacteria, or genetic mutations. Colds, flu, allergies, cancer. These words are utterly absent from our lexicon. The very concept of medicine never even arises. Why would we need doctors if no one ever gets sick? Why pharmacies if there's nothing to heal? Surgery, pharmacology, entire branches of science simply never develop, rendered obsolete before they can even begin. We are simply unfamiliar with pain as a symptom of disease. We have no fear of infection, no anxiety about epidemics. Our bodies are not fragile vessels requiring constant safeguarding and repair. Instead, they are reliable, self-sufficient instruments for an eternal, joyous life in paradise. This is a state of absolute, unshakable health. Okay, what about our most fundamental need, food? Here, it's even simpler. The problem of hunger is solved once and for all. Imagine you never have to think about what you'll eat tomorrow, next week, or even next year. Toiling in fields from dawn till dusk. Forget about it. Hunting wild animals to feed your family? That simply doesn't exist. The Garden of Eden is an endless, self-replenishing buffet. Trees themselves extend their ripe fruit to you. All you have to do is reach out and take it. Consequently, agriculture simply never develops. No need to plough the land, sow seeds, and wait for a harvest. No need for storerooms, barns, or winter provisions. The entire economy built around food production and distribution simply never emerges. Food isn't a resource to be fought over. It's simply a given, like the air we breathe. Now, let's turn our attention to our fellow inhabitants of this garden, the animals. In our world, there's a food chain with predators and prey. But in Eden, such concepts simply don't exist. That biblical image of a lion lying peacefully beside a lamb. Here, it's an everyday reality. Predators don't hunt herbivores because there's simply no need. The entire animal kingdom thrives on an abundant supply of plant-based food. The primal human fear of wild animals, one of our most ancient instincts, is utterly unknown to us here. You can approach a tiger and pet it like a domestic cat without any fear of being eaten. Snakes aren't venomous, spiders aren't dangerous. Animals aren't a source of food, nor are they raw material for clothing or any kind of threat. Instead, they are our companions. We are not kings of nature, conquering it for our own ends. Rather, we are a harmonious part of it, its friends and neighbours. This is a world of absolute trust and harmony among all living beings. Let's delve deeper into human psychology. What happens to us when we don't differentiate between good and evil? First and foremost, shame vanishes. That very awkwardness and embarrassment Adam and Eve felt upon realising their nakedness would never emerge in our scenario. The very concept of clothing as a means to cover the body is simply absent. Clothing isn't needed for protection from the cold, nor is it required for adhering to social norms and decorum. We perceive our bodies naturally, just like any other part of nature. Without shame, the complex emotions associated with it, self-doubt, body image issues, and envy of others' beauty, simply wouldn't arise. We would live in a state of absolute openness and acceptance of ourselves and others, both physically and emotionally. It's a world without masks or pretense. Now imagine a world where the very concept of evil itself simply vanishes. All those dark emotions that poison our lives, envy, greed, anger, deceit, betrayal, they're simply absent from our emotional landscape. Why envy your neighbour if you both have everything in boundless abundance? Why hoard wealth when everything is shared and accessible to all? Why deceive when there's no gain to be had from dishonesty? Consequently, conflicts disappear from the world. Completely. There are no petty domestic squabbles over trivial matters, no animosity between families or tribes, and, naturally, the most dreadful invention of humankind, born from hatred and greed, war itself, simply ceases to exist. This is a world built on absolute honesty and mutual understanding, where the word enemy was simply never conceived. This is a society of perfect, unwavering harmony. But what about our relationship with the creator of all this splendour? This is where another profound transformation occurs. In our world, religion often functions as a path through intermediaries, priests, prophets, saints, sacred texts. We seek the divine in temples through prayers and rituals. However, in a world untouched by the fall, that distance simply vanishes. Communication with God isn't a scheduled ritual or a formal prayer. It's a constant, natural dialogue, as simple as talking to a friend while strolling through a garden. His presence doesn't need to be proven or sought out. It's felt as plainly as the warmth of the sun. Consequently, priests, prophets, or sacred texts would never emerge. Why would you need interpreters when you can ask directly? Why would sacred scriptures be necessary if revelation is a constant, unfolding reality? Religion as an institution simply doesn't come into being. There's no need to build temples because the entire Garden of Eden is the temple itself. Faith isn't faith. It's knowledge, direct, personal, and undeniable. But this raises an intriguing question. What happens to free will? Aren't we simply reduced to being mindless puppets in this ideal world? Not at all. Free will doesn't simply vanish. After all, it's precisely because of free will that in our alternative history, Adam and Eve made the right choice. They decided not to eat the forbidden fruit. The very nature of this freedom, however, fundamentally shifts. In our world, free will is a constant choice between good and evil, creation and destruction. In Eden, on the other hand, where evil as such doesn't exist, free will is directed purely towards creation. It's not a choice between good and bad, but rather between good and even better. For example, which tree shall I plant today? What melody shall I compose? What new facet of this beautiful world shall I explore? Our will becomes not a tool for battling temptations, but an instrument of pure, unadulterated creativity and exploration. Let's now turn to another crucial aspect that sin profoundly altered: childbirth. In the biblical narrative, Eve was told, "In pain you shall bring forth children." For millennia, this curse has been an undeniable, almost defining part of the female experience. But in the scenario we're exploring, this curse simply doesn't exist. The process of bringing new life into the world is entirely free from pain and suffering. It's not an ordeal to be endured, but a natural, joyous act of creation. There is no fear surrounding childbirth, no associated risks or complications. From its very first moments, motherhood is pure, unadulterated joy, untouched by physical agony. This is yet another detail in the portrait of a world where harmony and grace permeate every single aspect of existence, even those that, in our reality, are synonymous with pain. All right, we've painted a picture of an ideal life for an individual. But what happens when there are many such people? Here we run into the first serious logical problem: overpopulation. If no one ever dies and children continue to be born, even painlessly, the Garden of Eden would eventually become too crowded. How would this problem be solved? Perhaps birth rates are somehow naturally regulated. Or perhaps the Garden of Eden itself magically expands to accommodate everyone. Or maybe humanity simply stops reproducing at some point, having reached an ideal number. This question remains open, but it highlights that even in paradise, unique challenges could arise, requiring unconventional solutions. This might even be the initial spark for the development of something akin to a society. But here's the truly interesting part: what truly drives progress in our world? More often than not, it's born out of necessity and the struggle for survival. We invented the wheel to make transporting goods easier. We learned to harness fire to keep warm and protect ourselves from predators. We developed weapons for warfare. But in a world without necessity or conflict, what would possibly motivate technological advancement? Chances are, technology as we understand it simply wouldn't emerge. Why invent a plough if food grows effortlessly on its own? Why construct ships if there's no need to traverse oceans in pursuit of a better life? Why create complex machinery if there's no strenuous labour to alleviate? Humanity would remain in a state of technological simplicity. We'd live in complete harmony with nature, never attempting to reshape or dominate it. Our minds wouldn't be preoccupied with solving engineering problems, and that fundamentally alters the entire trajectory of our development. All right, if technology isn't in the picture, perhaps all our energy would channel into creativity. What about art? But here we encounter yet another paradox. Just think, what truly inspires the greatest works of art in our world? Often it's born from pain, from suffering, from tragic love, from the struggle against evil, from the relentless search for meaning in an imperfect world. Shakespeare's tragedies, brimming with betrayal and death, backs profound, poignant music, often set to religious texts about sin and redemption, paintings depicting battles and suffering. Would there be a place for such art in an eternal, serene paradise? Most likely, no. Our art would be light, joyful, harmonious, but it would lack the profound depth born from overcoming darkness. It would be beautiful, but perhaps a little superficial. We wouldn't have Dostoevsky, because there would be no crime and no punishment. Let's talk about work. In our world, work is the very foundation of the economy, and for many, a fundamental means of survival. We work to earn money for food, shelter, and clothing. The biblical curse proclaimed, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your bread." But in a world untouched by the fall, that curse simply wouldn't exist. The very notion of work as a heavy burden or a grim necessity would be entirely absent. This doesn't mean we'd spend eternity in idle leisure doing nothing. Instead, our activities would simply take on a completely different nature. It would be creativity for its own sake, exploration of the world driven purely by curiosity, and connection for the sheer joy of companionship. We might tend a garden not out of fear of starvation, but simply because it brings us aesthetic pleasure. We might study animal behaviour not for hunting, but purely out of fascination. Our lives, then, wouldn't be a struggle for survival, but rather a state of pure, unadulterated being. So, what would the social structure of such a world look like? The answer is simple. There wouldn't be one. In our world, cities emerged as hubs for trade and defence. States and borders were established to manage resources and guard against enemies. Laws were created to resolve disputes. But in Eden, none of this is necessary. Why build walled cities if there are no enemies to protect against? Why have borders when the entire world is a shared home and there are no territorial disputes? What need is there for kings, governments, or armies? All these complex social constructs simply wouldn't arise. Humanity would live as one vast family, free from hierarchy, power struggles, or subjugation. We would be a single people without nations, language barriers, or political divisions. It's a world without complex civilization as we know it. As we continue to explore the theme of development, let's shift our focus to science. In our world, fundamental science is born from a deep desire to understand how everything works so we can then apply that knowledge. Physics, for instance, is crucial for constructing bridges and machines. Chemistry enables us to create new materials and medicines, and biology helps us understand diseases and improve crop yields. However, in a world without practical needs, science as we know it simply wouldn't develop. Why study the laws of gravity if there's no need to launch satellites? Why delve into polymer chemistry if we don't need to produce plastics? Our understanding of the world would be more contemplative than analytical. We might admire the beauty of the night sky, but astrophysics would never emerge. We could observe plant life, but the field of genetics would never be born. The scientific method itself, built on experimentation and hypothesis testing to solve problems, would simply have no purpose. But what about the tempting serpent, the very catalyst for it all? In our story, he was cursed and banished, but what happens in a world where his temptation failed? He doesn't simply vanish, he remains there in the Garden of Eden. He becomes a living monument of sorts, a constant, silent reminder of the choice Adam and Eve refused to make. Perhaps he still tries, approaching people, whispering his temptations, but no one listens. His whispers of power, knowledge and might ring hollow in a world where true harmony already reigns supreme. He's reduced to a local oddity, just background noise that no one pays attention to. His very existence serves as a constant affirmation of the wisdom of their choice. But he's no longer a real threat, just a lingering shadow of a missed opportunity for evil. Let's now consider the global implications. This entire scenario fundamentally rewrites the history of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Their entire theological framework is built upon the concept of the fall and the subsequent path to salvation. If there's no original sin, this elaborate structure simply crumbles. There's no need for covenants or prophets to remind humanity of God. No need for sacrifices to atone for sins. And, most importantly, within Christian theology, the very need for a saviour simply vanishes. The mission of Jesus Christ, his sacrifice on the cross, loses its fundamental purpose because there's simply nothing to be saved from. Global history itself, along with all the religions that shaped our civilization, would either unfold in a radically different, unimaginable way, or simply never come into being at all. This doesn't just alter a single narrative, it shatters the very foundation of our entire culture. And now we arrive at the central, most challenging question. We've envisioned a world free of pain, fear, and evil. But what kind of human beings would we be in such a world? Without struggle, without overcoming adversity, without knowing darkness to truly appreciate the light? Would we still be human as we understand ourselves today? It's challenges that forge character. It's loss that teaches us to truly value what we have. And it's the knowledge of evil that makes our choice for good truly meaningful and deliberate. Without all of this, wouldn't we just become eternal, blissful, yet fundamentally infantile children? Beings who would never fully realize their potential because there would simply be no impetus to do so. We might be happy, but would that happiness truly be deep and meaningful? This is the crucial question that casts doubt on the true perfection of this paradise. And this is where our thought experiment leads us to a truly startling conclusion. Perhaps this ideal paradise, this utopia we've been discussing, might actually turn out to be a gilded cage. True, there's no suffering, but there's also no genuine growth, no development, none of the drama of life that truly shapes us. Humanity, forever confined to such an Eden, would be like a beautiful plant that never blooms, kept in perfect sterile greenhouse conditions. We would never truly discover what we're capable of. We would never build great civilizations, never compose the brilliant symphonies born from profound struggle, nor make the scientific breakthroughs spurred by the sheer necessity to survive. This perfect world would be static, unchanging, and ultimately, perhaps, incredibly boring. It would be an eternity without history. Now let's piece all of this together, because here's where the real twist comes in. We imagined paradise, a utopia, but what did we actually get? A humanity that knows no suffering, but also no true joy of overcoming challenges. People who are strangers to hatred, but likely incapable of the deep, sacrificial love forged in adversity. A world devoid of art, born from pain. A world without science, driven by necessity. It turns out the forbidden fruit wasn't merely a mistake. It was an act that ignited the entirety of human history as we know it. Yes, it brought death and suffering into the world, but it also ushered in freedom of choice in its fullest sense. It empowered us to be not mere inhabitants of paradise, but architects of our own destiny. It gave us knowledge of the darkness so we could consciously strive towards the light. It was the expulsion from paradise that compelled us to invent, to build, to unite, to forge great civilizations, to write brilliant books and music. Our entire history, with all its horrors and triumphs, is a direct consequence of that single choice. It turns out that the curse became, simultaneously, our greatest gift, the gift to become exactly who we are today. So perhaps a world where the apple was never eaten would have been perfect, but it would have been utterly empty, and it certainly wouldn't have included us, you and me. Thank you for sticking with us until the very end of this video. If this thought experiment gave you food for thought, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future intriguing hypotheses. Now for a question for you. Which world do you believe is truly better? Ours with all its flaws and triumphs, or an eternal, yet unchanging paradise? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to read what you think.